Over the past few months, I've been overcome with the urge to spread gospel against anatomy studies. I try to hold off on doing it directly because I don't necessarily enjoy being a nuisance, but I still have a need to let out my thoughts about the topic when to start anatomy studies. The main drive behind this video was the countless amount of times I've seen clear newbies ask for advice and get linked hour-long detailed anatomy lectures. But recently I've been posting these practice time lapses on TikTok, and I have got more than enough people asking me how I learned anatomy. The answer to that is I haven't. This is a form in perspective practice. So before I yap even more, let me clarify the way I use some terms, because everyone seems to have different definitions of them, though I believe mine are close to the classic way. When I say anatomy, I mean the detailed information about the under the skin. It's learning how the bones look, where the joints are, how the muscles look and connect, what do they do, etc. Perspective is the rule set that allows us to translate the 3D information we see day to day onto a 2D surface. Form is any object from the most complex to the most basic, which we place in perspective. These definitions kind of summarize my opinion. The whole idea is that if you don't know the rule set to place 3D forms on a 2D surface, it doesn't matter how intricate of a detail you memorize about the form, because it'll go unutilized anyway. This is not something I came up with myself, but I guess it's not spread wide enough or everyone seems to ignore it, so I want to do my due diligence and illustrate it a bit clearly with some personal anecdotes. I obviously feel very passionate about this point, but it's not like I've mastered it. That's why we have to compare the current me not with the 100% correct reality, but with the old me. So here is an imaginative drawing from 2.5 years ago, and another from 3+ years ago. If I happen to not study or improve at any of the art fundamentals except anatomy, this is what they will look like now. And this is how they look redrawn with no references after I've practiced a bunch of boxes and poses in boxes. As I said, these aren't perfect. They have problems I can see at the moment, and even more that I'm not able to see. But I think we all can agree that from a technical standpoint, the redraws are way better than the originals and the anatomy study alternate universe. Now, the first one is a very unlucky case most people will not fall into. Art subjects all feed from one another. If you get real better at one, you'll get slightly better at others. And you don't really know much about me, but if you did, this would have made you ask something like, but you've been doing figure drawings every day for the past 2+ years, and you'd be very justified in questioning the truth of that. So let's look at an imaginative drawing from last summer, when I had been doing daily figure drawings for a long time, but have not studied any anatomy nor perspective. The idea for this was imaginative, but unlike the redraws from before, I had lots of references for it. I had so many references that one of them was a straight-up 3D model of the same exact pose from the same exact angle. Still, my drawing ended up very flat, almost as if the character was a paper cutout and had no volume. The reason for this was that I did not understand form in perspective. Therefore, I was not able to transform this form from the reference to the form of the character. As a more recent example, the difference between this and this, or this and this, is not that I magically lost all the knowledge I had of anatomy in the span of 5 minutes. It's that I sucked at getting the perspective. Before, even though I was pretty good at observational drawing of all kinds of objects, and had done daily figure drawings for 2 years, I had no idea where to start with imaginative drawing and always got immobilized at the thought of it. Even if I pushed through and started scribbling something, I felt like a civilian in an airplane's pilot room. I had no intention behind my lines, and therefore if something went wrong, I didn't know why that happened or how it could be fixed. By having practiced perspective, I feel confident that if I can get the Sigma version of the pose, then I can give it flesh, make it look like a person, and even draw it from a bunch of different angles. I'm still at 50%, so it's safe to say I'll struggle with a lot of the complex ones, but I still know the why of my struggle and how it can be reduced. A body part that people immediately resort to learning the anatomy of is the hand. It is also the thing I felt the results of my perspective practice most whilst drawing them from imagination. Hands are a special case where they are always in your vision, but we still have so much trouble drawing them. When you want to draw it in a particular pose, you can do the exact pose with your own hands, but unless you take a photo or use a mirror, there will be frequent cases where you can't even get it look convincing, and you find it in reality. This is where perspective comes in. As long as I know what the hand is doing, I can draw it from most angles. Most of these were drawn without any reference. This one I only needed a reference for a singular thumb. None of these would have been achievable if I only studied anatomy without perspective. The complete opposite of my case right now. You know what a hand looks like. There's this square, then a triangle, and then 5 cylinders. The thumb bends once and the rest bends twice. You know what a body looks like. You have lived your whole life in one and looking at even more. The reason you can't draw that cool pose you have in your mind is not because you don't know where the biceps connect to, but it's because you don't know perspective, the alphabet of drawing. I want to be very clear, I don't mean to say you don't need to learn anatomy ever. I'm saying that anatomy might not be the most important and impactful subject that you need to study right this moment. Learning anatomy to draw from imagination without practicing perspective is like making a 7-year-old memorize high school level formulas without ever teaching them addition or multiplication. The formulas aren't really wasted time as long as you go back and teach them the 4 arithmetics and all the other steps that come before them. But you also shouldn't be surprised if only after memorizing the formulas they aren't able to solve the senior grade problems you give them. And it's crucial to keep in mind that only very few exceptional kids will be able to figure it out on their own without being pointed in the right direction. The most important step of fixing a problem is the diagnosis of it. If your goal is to draw bodies, poses, characters from imagination, and you're studying anatomy for that purpose, you're fixing a problem, but probably not the one you were meaning to. I think we can do a little test to make it more clear which one you need the most at the moment. We're going to be drawing this body that's not exactly a stick man, but is also not realistic at all. Now we need to first draw this body in a pose. Pick something simple, maybe like walking. Draw it from the front and side views. After that, try drawing this pose from a few different angles. Again, picking simple ones. You can further this test by getting more complex poses or trying to redraw the initial drawings with a body that's more muscular and realistic. If you can't do this or struggle at some parts of it, like if the pose or the angle gets more complex as per your personal goal, then anatomy might not be the first priority for you. Now, everyone's intuitively good at something in life, and maybe that's perspective for you. Or maybe you got better at it subconsciously by just drawing from imagination a bunch. But if you're not struggling much with this test, then that's where you will get the most improvement from studying anatomy. As said, you're bound to improve by the nature of just doing the act more. Leaving improvement to the nature is kind of a gamble, but it's not as scary as you might think. When you look at a spectrum like this, you might be led to believe that all options have similar possibilities. Though I don't have cool scientific articles I can plot to support my point, I'd wager most people will be the decent improvement with decent effort, while less are low improvement with high effort and very few high improvement with low effort. So even if you continue to draw from imagination without paying any regards to perspective, let alone study it, you'll still get better at it over time, with a few seasons or a few years. But what I'm suggesting is, if you're willing to do the boring, tedious tasks of art, you might have a much easier time if you just gain a basic understanding of form and perspective before you dive into anything complicated like anatomy. This is the math behind the 3D world we live in, and once you learn how to put that 3D information onto a 2D surface, everything else is just going to be so much more easier. I don't know if you necessarily have to learn perspective through boxes. I tried coming up with other examples but wasn't able to. If you find one you like better, just try it out. You won't lose anything. If you are interested in how I'm learning it myself, I explain it in these videos. Now, these are kind of cringe. My mind keeps making jokes that are not funny at all, but I'm very confident in my explanations, especially in this video. And like, you're free to think I'm full of bullshit and just continue on with your life. There are many cases where I ignore well-spread advice by multiple professionals simply because I don't feel like it. In my mind, if I'm right, I'm right, and if I'm not, it's a lesson for me to suffer through and learn. Likewise, if I decide to follow every word of someone, and after much time find out that maybe I shouldn't have done that, that is also a lesson for me to suffer through and learn. I find it much better to think that I failed or had mistakes due to my own decisions, so I can take full accountability, brush it off like it was nothing, and move forward quickly. I enjoyed considering learning art to be my little DIY scientific experiment.